We are recording with Colonel Buer on, Monday, June 26th, 2023 at 2:08 p.m. Eastern Time. Author of Ghosts of Baghdad, and that the link to that book will be in the description. And yeah, man, you've got quite the hair-raising career of giving me the ass pucker factor, and I've never even been in a helicopter in my life. And but with that, Colonel, could you please introduce yourself while I post the live link?
Tommy, thanks for having me. Eric Buer, retired Marine, and living here in lovely Pensacola, Florida now.
So as I post this, but are there any things that you like want to fly that you never got close to flying? I mean, obviously there's classified shit like, what was it, I guess the stealth Black Hawk, excuse me, Black Hawk used during Operation Neptune Spear, or something like the new, I think it's the Sikorsky Boeing Defiant. I mean, are there things that kind of make you drool, make your mouth water?
You know, there are there's a lot of platforms I like to get one hop in, just because, uh, you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. I've had a chance to fly in some pretty neat platforms, um, but I've got my dance date, so I'm going to dance with her. So she was my favorite. So I'd love to fly a little bit of everything, but you kind of fall in love with your machine, and that's that.
Now, how do you come back down from a career like that in terms of just like every everyday life? And I never served. I've shot a gun maybe 10 times in my life, so I can only relate with the experiences I have. But in college, I was a pre-med student, and I got into medical school, and it was like the most exhilarating journey of my life trying to get it. Just the competition, the ruthlessness. And I remember when I got in, I didn't know what to do. I was a dog that finally caught the car, and I was like, this is I don't like this. And then I decided not to go, and I didn't have any goals for a while, and my life kind of collapsed on itself. And starting this podcast a couple of years ago, despite the constant stress and panic attacks and, again, cutthroatedness, I wouldn't I wouldn't trade it for anything, because it's like an electric current every single day. I swear it is almost like a biblical fashion. It is like the genesis of life. Just to wait, today could be a rainy Monday in Maine, or it's another day where it's like, I've got 4 interviews today. Like, how am I going to knock them out of the park? How am I going to get that much better today? If I didn't have this constant thing, I mean, I would imagine I would degrade into just drinking every day. So how do you come back down from a life that most people get to observe through movies or video games, but you actually got to live?
Yeah, in my case, I don't. There's no replacing that. At some point, you just have to accept it. Um, it's easy to accept it when you tell yourself it's a young man's game, because it's a young man's game. Um, but when I was doing, this tour, which I write about, and in subsequent follow-ons, I wasn't necessarily a young man. I was, late 30s, but you feel like you can do everything physically, mentally, emotionally, intellectually. You're pretty peaked, on a military side. Um, yeah, there's certainly a letdown. And I've started. Yeah, I turned to business. I worked for a big Fortune 500 that had mixed reviews. I've started a couple of companies with partners. They've had mixed reviews. Still going in certain ways. So no, it's a journey. It's hard to really replicate, the challenges of military aviation. So I don't think there's any way you fill that. It just kind of sits there, and you do other things.
So you just kind of pass the time then.
Well, no, you work, you got full
Yeah.
days, you do things, and as your kids get older, I got kids, and they got other things they need to do, and they're graduating from college, and there's other important things in your life. I just don't, I don't sit around very often and reminisce. I talk to old friends, which is great. Which is one of the great things about this book. I had hundreds of hours of interviews, and actually, I had a group back here in Pensacola, about 8 of us, from a different deployment. We showed up at my house last couple weekends ago now, and it was great. It's like time just froze. And
Mm.
yeah, the great thing about interviews, the great thing about this book was reconnecting with people, just sitting down and talking about this and getting their perspectives. And like, no, I didn't see it that way. I saw it this way. And so that's another thing I made sure I did. I captured a lot of perspectives, and, you know, this isn't my story. It's their story. It's just told through my mouthpiece and my lens, but it's their story. So that was incredibly rewarding. And so
Mhm.
writing has become very rewarding for me. So if I had to say there's going to be a next passion, it's what I'm doing right now with the writing.
Interesting. And one of the more delightful yet humbling experiences I never know if I enjoy it or if it's just some weird form of Stockholm syndrome where I've just like grown to like enjoy the abuse. Like early on, nobody likes to be told they're wrong. Nobody likes that dawning realization that you're wrong and that you've been making an incorrect argument. Santa is real, the world is flat, and then you start to sober up and you're like, oh shit, what am I arguing about? But through repetition and through hundreds of these episodes, I've actually come to enjoy it. I've come to enjoy being proven wrong because there's no taking it back. It's on video, it's live. There's no taking back like the flushing of the face where you're like, oh shit. But then you kind of get closer and closer to the truth, and through repetition and almost through building up a tolerance or callous, or yeah, a callous, if you will, much like weightlifting to it, you start to appreciate being wrong. And so, if I interview a doctor or special forces operator and I throw out an idea and they immediately shoot it down, now I enjoy that because I feel like I'm getting closer to the truth of whatever the truth is, of whatever this reality is, this life here on earth, whatever it is. So with that, and then also, in light of what we're seeing right now in Ukraine, Russia, and every loss of life is obviously unbearable. Do you think that there is, on one hand, you have the technological unstoppability of time. We are moving towards more drone centric, either entirely or, partially unmanned platforms. On one hand, from, the simple, and this is where I'm teeing myself up to being correct, we have the simplistic civilian who looks at it and goes, drones all the way. You don't, every funeral that people don't have to attend is a plus. And you could also argue philosophically that makes war more palatable, which is itself bad, as excuse me, Curtis LeMay said. War should be absolutely unpalatable. You should use excessive force so that no one wants it to ever happen again. How do you view things like the advent and the increasing percentage use of drones, specifically in air power?
Yeah, I love a good Curtis. What would Kurt do? Good Kurt LeMay quote. It's always good
He
to have
he, he would
around.
nuke them and then go to bed.
He would have a stogie in his mouth.
Yeah,
Um,
hydrogen bombs on foreheads. Go to bed, you commie. Yeah.
yeah. So, it's just the evolving kind of character of war. I think the nature of war is pretty resolute. I mean, it's just a battle of wills, and it's the character of war that's going to change things. Someone's just phone linked up to my computer.
You're good. You're good.
There we go. So I had a lot of experience with UASs, particularly in Afghanistan. And you see Title 10, Title 50, when you see everyone using UASs. I mean, it's very indiscriminate. It's very precise. It's very effective.
Could you define UAS?
But just all the unmanned aerial systems, drones
Gotcha.
so unmanned aerial systems. You had drones. We look at Predators and Reapers, big drones carrying Hellfire missiles, carrying a lot of sensors, long on station time, can virtually track people almost, untraceably. Low radar cross sections, very, very safe to fly and fight with. And in my mind, for those type of precision missions, you're looking for one person, unfortunately, one target. But when you're trying to affect the outcome of a war, I did a little think piece on Ukraine, and I think one thing the Ukraine can do now and in their future is develop a very realistic and very robust helicopter force. And people say, oh, helicopters have been around 70 years. There is nothing like, just use the example of the Russians. Imagine if you had 10 Black Hawks with 10 special forces teams dropped in 10 different locations, what that would do to their morale.
Oh yeah.
especially the Russians. Very centrally, they very centrally lead everything. Conscript forces, you strike their morale. Russian peoples knowing that there's special forces units behind them. Attack helicopters, being able to go in low at night, bad weather, strike strategic nodes, and that would just demoralize them. And so it's very important, and that's a very human endeavor in my mind. So, there's the ethical side of it. We didn't bring ourselves, and a lot of times folks don't bring themselves into these wars. They're just trying to find a way out.
Yeah.
Find a way to, have some type of negotiated peace, and sometimes a political settlement isn't always possible. But yeah, the drones aren't going anywhere. I mean, the Russians use them now with pretty decent effective. The Ukrainians clearly using them now. But you see what the Russians do now. I mean, in some senses, they push their drones forward, and they use really 1950s tubed artillery, and they rubbleize cities like it's the 1940s.
Yeah.
And they protect their drawbacks with sniper fire, and they reconstitute. There's nothing. I mean, it's just that's LeMay fighting. That's really absolute destruction, and that's not. It's not going to get better. The Russians are not. That's as good as the Russians are going to get.
Yeah.
Until they really understand where they are and what their end state is.
Yeah, and then the question is like, do you want it to get better? If you want to avoid war, I mean, do you unleash total hell so that it ends as quickly as possible? It's the philosophical aspect of like, does it make war more ethical? That's also what, I'm 32 years old. That's something like, I can sit in this apartment in Maine and ask the total pussy question of like, does it make war more ethical? It's like, no, it's all hell. It's all, that's all somebody's son, somebody's daughter, somebody's mom, somebody's dad. It doesn't make it any better. And if I'm gonna sit here on one hand and be like, well, makes war more ethical or more palatable, and thus it's unethical, it's like, well, you can't really make that argument because 425,000 Americans died in World War II, 58,000 died in Vietnam, 7,500 died in GWAT. Like, so are you telling me that's a bad progression? By that very logic of like every funeral is a bad thing, you would then have to say, no, it is. Making it more palatable is by definition making it better. But then there's also the whole not musical chairs. There's the whole maybe musical chairs-esque dance around it of using drones, using precision strikes, using counterinsurgency strikes. Even that almost seems to be like these weird formalities of, the Cold War was, it's proxy this, it's agents on the ground that, it's what happens if they come through this pass. Well, they're going to use their tanks, we're going to use our A-10s, then they're going to use it all very quickly, in theory, just escalates to thermonuclear warheads from orbit. So
Yeah.
might as well use the more palatable option, because if it goes, it's going to go.
Well, I agree with as long as wars drag on, they certainly get more violent. They certainly become more dehumanizing. It's a lot easier to look at people without any face. They're faceless, and they need to be destroyed at kind of any cost. We debated this for years. I remember Command Staff College, War College, talking about hey, do we invade mainland Japan? What would that have cost us? And the people, it's a total war. It's a total war in every ounce of what the United States does for production, its people, and its power and its wealth is designed to win this war, this global struggle. And we debate: do you drop a nuclear bomb to end the war, or do you send 1 million soldiers and Marines into mainland Japan to essentially fight, women and children, the last man standing?
Yeah.
And so I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to it. I think the nuclear piece just becomes so abhorrent because there's really there's no coming back from it. The discussion right now is, I was listening to Admiral Stavridis earlier today talking. He's talking about the real modern side of the Russian forces is in their strategic forces, their bomber forces, and nuclear forces that are kept with the best gear, in theory, some of the best leadership. That is singularly the most dangerous thing. And I think they understand that too. To drop another nuclear bomb it would forever change the landscape of the world. I mean, it could be the end of the world as we know it. But that's not trying to use scare tactics or fear tactics. But whatever tactic you use, whether it's a modern tactic or what we see in the future, whether it affects cyber, and it has to find a way to have rational debate, rational understanding. There has to be some type of agreement that ends all these wars. There's always going to be a political agreement of some sort. Yeah, it always comes to it some way or the other. I would rather rush to it. Hey, I want to, the world's been in a persistent state of conflict for the last 70 plus years, right? It's a persistent state of conflict. And it's how we deal with it. Bigger, better, badder weapons. I don't know if that's going to make things, easier or more complex. I suspect it's more complex. It's the nuclear option as it relates to Russia. That's their last final vote they get. And I don't think that it would ever go there. But it's easy for me to say. I'm not on the border. I don't live in Poland. And I certainly don't live in Ukraine. I don't live in Germany. It's easy for me to say that. And good on those who are joining NATO or attempting to join NATO now. That's the biggest, and for me, that's the biggest message, telling Putin, hey, you have no ethical, no moral, no legal right. You have nothing to stay. Everything beneath you has crumbled, right? There's nothing you've done. That's a war, pure war of aggression. And so his thoughts and ideas of potential nuclear options are, it's a big bark. I just don't know that, any dictator is about regime preservation, right? They want to stay there. They don't want to go. They like what they got. It's a good deal.
Yeah.
So I don't know how he's going to back himself down from this right now, but again, time will tell on this.
Yeah, there's almost with nuclear weapons. I always think of I think it's Eric Schlosser who wrote Command and Control, and he's talking about all the Broken Arrow events, and I think it was Arkansas, but like that Titan missile, I don't know, it's a whole story, but he goes into kind of going into all the command and controls and strategic air command and first strike, decapitation strike, deterrence, all that good stuff. But he ends the book, and it's the line that always sticks with me. And he goes like, the Cold War is over, but these silos are still out in the Midwest or wherever with the giant bulkhead doors with two people down there, each with a key. And these missiles, I think it's like a giant gun cocked and pointing towards the sky. And he goes, and they work. We have this idea, maybe not all of us, maybe not someone like yourself, but to the layman civilian like me, we have this idea that the Cold War is over and that everything with it just went. And these missiles, which have a ballistic trajectory, go into orbit like a shotgun, explode, 100, 200, 300 miles above the earth and shoot multiple independent reentry vehicles down at, it's all still there. And so, whereas we might say it's easy for us to criticize or not criticize Ukraine and or Russia because we don't live in Poland or Belarus. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't apply to nuclear weapons. I live in Maine. Okay, well, if Putin uses a nuclear weapon, it will very much so affect me. It will affect you. It will affect everyone. And then you come down to, I think it was Eisenhower, who was there's some minutes of him in a meeting, and they're talking about rebuilding U.S. society after a nuclear strike. There's all these plans about, well, the post office will be used to, the U.S. Postal Service will be used to pick up bodies, and the national parks will be used for, those will be used for hunting and for gathering, lumber. And they're talking about all this stuff. And throughout all of it, Eisenhower finally stands up and he goes like, and this is from Garrett Graff's Raven Rock, is he goes, you don't understand. The average man, even the hardened military man, will be absolutely mad, truly insane, in that there will be no grasping. There will be no rational touch of reality. It's not that this is post-World War II Europe. It's like nothing will be here anymore. Truly nothing. I mean, we will be back to bows and arrows, to the preservation of the English language isn't guaranteed. The whole point of that, what I just said, is, do you think there's any way for the average person to actually grasp that? And is that why we maybe see people like last year throwing around these loose, like, oh, the United States needs to do a preemptive nuclear attack, or if Russia uses a tactical nuke, here's why that might not be that bad. Do you think anyone, myself, yourself included, has any like true grasp of this is the edge of a black hole? We are going, this is the event horizon. No one knows what happens if all these things get fired.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the way, that's special trust and confidence, in our leaders to say, God, there's rational thought, right? I know it's a big one. But it is, but I mean, there's got to be grownups in this world that understand that it's not, it's that constant dialogue that needs to remain, particularly in U.S. politics. You just need rational, sane leaders that are here to make real decisions that aren't always about whatever the next social position is, whatever the next, pick your polarizing topic in America you want to talk about. And you and I, you're from Maine. You and I could sit down and I could talk to you and I could say, hey Tommy, you're from Maine. You're a Pats fan. You're probably a Sox fan. You've probably been to some Sea Dogs games. I hate all those teams. Like, what the hell,
Yeah.
or I could say, hey Tommy, I'm a Pats fan. I'm a big Sox fan. I get up to see the Portland Sea Dogs in the summertime, and I enjoy my time in Maine. How easy is that, right?
Yeah.
I could burn a bridge in 15 seconds. It's what we become. It's what sells. It's what buys. It's all this visceral, all this hate. It becomes so pervasive. But I don't think, and I tie this back to your point about a nuclear option leadership, is that's what we pay these people to do. We pay these people to make adult decisions for the country, understand the history, where we are, who we are, what it took us to get here, and what's going to get us over this next hurdle. What's going to get us over this? Look at today. Look at the socialists that are trying to just tear us internally apart. And there's so much great we do every day, and there's so much great we do in this country every day, and so much of it is missing. And some of it's never reported, right? It's the old, no one logs in a safe landing, right? They only want to know when you balled it up and
Yeah.
you crashed it on short final, and they want to critique the hell out of you. But the Russia piece, the nuke piece, I think it's out there, and it's people, it's other people, it's the Iranians of the world who may be just loose enough to get it far enough. It may be the North Koreans who can just get loose enough and just send one far enough.
Yeah.
But they're also about regime preservation. They don't want to give it up. They want to rattle their sabers. It's just how we respond to it. I think if we continue to respond to things, we got to respond in a very rational, practical way, not backing down on issues, not backing down on threats. Hold people accountable for what they do. I know it gets into a spinning cycle of bad thoughts on these, but I am very optimistic. I remain optimistic. People asking often about military and social policies and these, and I'm in Pensacola, Florida, massive Navy base here. Fort Rucker's not far away. U.S. Special Operations, U.S. Air Force Special Op. I run into young people every single day, and they're just as motivated. They're just as intelligent, just as smart, just as balanced as I ever was in my life. And so that's always refreshing. So I think we've got an incredibly bright future. But we just got to find a way to refocus on it in a lot of ways, and capitalize on it, and just not be dragged down by things that really are really valueless. But somehow find a way to gain steam and gain traction, at least, exposure traction.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea of like not being able to put aside your own ego to just go talk to someone seems, I mean, Reagan had his whole, if an Ivan and a Susie met at a park or whatever he was going on about, or, JFK talking about the same thing about how you have to put yourself in their shoes. It kind of is almost the great equalizer, is this mutual assured destruction. It's because there's never a limit on what you'll do to the enemy. And that's not an opinion. That's just human history, right? There's like Genghis Khan. They would they would like light the bodies on fire of the dads and like throw so your father's flaming corpse would come through the ceiling. Yeah, there's real no limit on like what humans will do, unless of course it can come back at you. And on like a kind of detached, maybe nihilistic way, it is kind of hilarious that the most like peace inducing thing is our own egos. Like I won't fire my nuke at you because I don't want one coming through my ceiling. It's not not funny in that sense that peace will come not from love of our neighbor, but from love of ourselves. But that then ties me back to the whole drone take. It seems that we are just in an eternal escalation, and we can criticize the escalation of weaponry and technology. But if you ever let the guard down and that you don't have a credible deterrence to the next threat, whatever it is, and they never stop. You discover stealth, they discover stealth. You discover hypersonics, they do. Bioweapons, they do. Chemical weapons, they do. Lasers, it just goes on forever. And that might be the most palatable, most ethical thing you can do is to keep up with other nations. I mean, and I don't really know where you go from there. That so then is
Yeah, I think we've always looked to have some kind of. We don't want to fight tank on tank, jet on jet. We want asymmetric warfare, right? We always want to
yeah
be able to put our strengths to their weaknesses, and that's one of the greatest things that this nation and I would say a good chunk of our NATO allies have the ability to do because we have this technology. We can think through this technology. We have all these freedoms of thought and idea. And we cultivate them and we reward them. And some say we would weaponize them, but that's as old as gunpowder. That's as old as the airplane. That's as old as hot air balloon. Whatever piece of technologies you find, and throughout history, they're going to find a way to use it in defense of a society, defense of a nation, defense in this case of an ideal in our country. But it's what we will do. It's what we have done. We've led. We've always led. I mean, in modern, you're a biologist in modern times, and we put a man on the moon.
yeah
We put a man on the moon. I mean, how do you, my God, you put a man on the moon. It's unbelievable. You talked about stealth technology, atomic. We've beaten the atomic side of it, but stealth technology, low observable technologies. Look at cyber now. All the ways that we can find ways to both protect ourselves and keep ourselves with a competitive advantage over any ally, over any neighbor, right? And then use that as responsibly as we can. Hopefully, right? That's the whole intent, is that we don't think we're better. I don't believe we think we're better than anybody. We just we think of a different way. We're the most open and we're the most accommodating nation in the history of the world, and it's undeniable. All of our faults, but boy, oh boy, when you put us together and you focus us all, it's amazing what we've accomplished. You look at other nations that are, that are just under some type of whatever rule you want to look at. You look at our other emerging partners. Look at we talked about Russia. We talked about certainly talked about the Chinese. They can do some amazing things, but China has really one aircraft carrier that's kind of pseudo operational with cracks up and down the hull. I mean, they've had 100 years to figure it out, right? They're super fighters you see flying in the new Top Gun movie, right? They got about 20 of them, right? They're pretty cool, but they won't last the first day of the fight, and then they're gonna, we'll blacken the skies with F-35s and everything else this nation can bring. We don't want to. No one needs to. And I hate even the idea of we hear the terms pivot to the Pacific. Let's let them work their hemisphere, we'll work ours. Let's take care of our problems. You take care of your problems, and we'll see if we can find some places to work in the middle. But I think it leads this country to have such a tremendous technological advantage and continue to have a technological advantage that we'll enjoy for likely the foreseeable future. I know there's naysayers out there and there's doomsayers that say we don't, we won't, but we do, and we have, and we can, and I would say we will.
Yeah, if the giant flag that's been behind me for the last 1,200 episodes doesn't give it away, I'm clearly a little biased towards this country for, as you said, for all of its faults, all of its flaws. I do tend to look at. I look at it more as just this like when walls fall, which way do the people run? We can, you have a, especially my generation, you have a bunch of ungrateful, really, I mean, just communist shitheads. But it's like, no, I mean, I have friends that have immigrated from Bulgaria, from Kosovo, that have, for lack of a more formal term, dragged their balls through broken glass to get citizenship. And this isn't some 60s propaganda. This is like within the last 5 years. And then when you couple that with the location of this country, protected by two oceans and full of natural resources, I don't think we're ever going to get this roll of the dice again. That, again, for its flaws, a country where we elect the governance, where there are civil liberties, where there are protections, down to the fact that it's like you can own a gun purely written for the fact, and in case the government turns on you, here's a gun to. That's like a werewolf giving you a gun and being like, if the full moon comes out and I turn into a demon, I want you to shoot me in the head. I would be very wary of the werewolf, but I'd also be like, that's a guy that at least has some inkling of an idea of like, I might turn on you, right?
Yeah.
I guess that's how I look at the United States is we're never going to get this roll of the dice again. And because of that, I do think that it should be protected and defended with the hand of God. And if we can we tie that back into what you said earlier about, seeing young people joining up today and they are as motivated and as dedicated as you ever were? Because I know I can get very depressed when I look at my generation and I think this whole thing's going to shit. Does every generation think that?
I don't know, but I do. I thought my group, my
Yeah.
peers, I was a 21-year-old college senior. I thought I was kind of a slacker. And I'm going to, hey, this looks pretty cool. Um, well, saying you want to, for me, seek a commission as an officer in the Marine Corps, that's a whole different thing. At some point, I had when I was 19 years old and went to officer candidate school, it was like I stepped into a different world. It was like I stepped into a different world. And I quickly realized this is serious business. And these are serious, serious people who really, really care. It took a while to figure the care part out, right? Because they were usually, they were usually deep in you for something that I was, but you realize that those organizations, I mean, it exists. That's, I said, oh my God, I got to pick it up.
Yeah.
Um, and in my case, you become part of an organization that's bigger than I am, much bigger than I am. And when I learned about flying, I got an opportunity to come to flight training and fly. That responsibility, kind of that you owe it, right? You owe it back. Like you've been given all these incredible benefits, right? You've been given these incredible opportunities. In my case, I got a chance to go fly attack helicopters. This is really cool. This is really, really, really fun. But with that is this tremendous responsibility. You always know is the back of your head. So it doesn't go far. I think that's here today. I think if you walked into, I know we talked, there's problems with recruiting. And then when you have a recruiting issue on some social topic, it's blown out of proportion epically. But I can guarantee there's still amazing people every day to walk in and they raise their right hand and say, I want to be an infantryman. I want to work in cyber. I want to work in logistics. I want to go fly. A young woman comes in. You see them every day here. I want to go fly F-35s. I want to go fly F-18s. Say, come on, let's go. You're qualified. We'll train you as best we can. You give it all. We'll give. It's interesting. So I think every generation suffers from it. I think our generation, potentially maybe your generation in particular, you've grown up in a post 9/11 world where the world is this nation's been in conflict your entire adult life. And so that probably, with the growth of news, everything, there's access to everything, information's out there. But there's an amazing amount of people that every day say, this is a good friend of mine's bringing his son to the Naval Academy, swear him in later this week. There's no shortage of tens of thousands of people applying to the service academies and other commissioning sources or enlistment sources to come in and serve our country. It's just finding a way to make sure we don't we don't sell them short, right? Finally, we make sure they're well trained, well equipped, and that they're they're prepared to do the job we're going to ask them to do with the right leaders in place.
Now, in terms of just like wild speculation, what do you think's, some skunk works level stuff? What do you think's flying around out there
Yeah.
in the Nevada helicopters, jets, whatever? What do you think they're cooking up out there?
Yeah, that is something right out of a science fiction. I wish I knew. I mean, I wish I knew. They've long snatched away my top secret clearance,
Yep.
but and even then, you have to imagine there's just some amazing both manned and unmanned systems being developed. Um, just because
Yeah.
uh, when an SR-71 comes out of the middle of nowhere, and then an F-117 Nighthawk comes out, and then a stealth bomber, and then they're doing it. They're
Yeah.
just our best and brightest out there. And you talked about the ability of the 160th for the Osama bin Laden raid to fly that exceptionally modified Black Hawk, or whatever they end up naming it. Those types of aircraft, low observable aircraft, and then both, again, I said both manned and unmanned. I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Clearly unmanned when you're talking hypersonic speeds. Yeah, there's been an incredible refocus on UFOs and UFO, even government sponsored UFO organizations. I've talked to some folks that have worked in those offices, and we've all seen the videos, F-18s over the water of things moving well beyond the tracking capabilities of radars. Yeah, I'm excited because I don't think they've ever let us down. I think anything they've ever done on the Skunk Works side, or Skunk Works Plus, or Son of Skunk Works, they've just been who we expected them to be. And like it was in Panama, and they used the F-117. They're like,
Yeah. What
what?
in God's name is that weird insect looking diamond box?
Yeah, and it worked. I know they still got a few flying right now for whatever reasons. But yeah, it's amazing. That's a bright spot. That'll make me smile if I think about it, because they're gonna do it. That's just,
Yeah.
again, the beauty of our technologies, and that's why I think that puts us. When you see I hate to compare it to a Chinese, you see a Chinese quote 5th gen fighter, and you would compare that to an F-22 or an F-35. You're like, yeah, it's not gonna.
Yeah.
It never make it to them. They're not designed to come to the merge, but they probably, that pilot wouldn't make it to his aircraft.
No. And
And
the F-22 is old now. Like when you look at how sexy that thing is, and then you're like, that's not even new.
no, but it's
It's
absolutely
incredible.
absolutely incredible.
It's
So yeah, I think we talk about what kind of big military R&D is doing. I think we can probably rest easy. They're doing some amazing stuff.
yeah, that topic will never not make me smile like an idiot. It's just like, what in God's name is out there? I mean, the SR-71, the F-117, the B-2, the B-21 Raider. I mean, it's got to get your brain spinning of like, what in God's name is out there? What are they actually making? Like, I want to believe it's UFOs, but even if it's not UFOs, the terrestrial answer is still sexy. I mean, skunk works. Like, it's still
Oh, yeah.
sexy, no matter what it is. Do you think, and I remember reading this article forever ago, I must have been in high school. I think it was Popular Science, and they were talking about whatever was going to replace the F-22. So this was back in like 2006. And I think the same name has been floating around. It's the PCA, the Penetrating Counter Air, where basically it looks like an F-22 and a B-2 had a child. There's like whatever. But they're interviewing like the Secretary of the Air Force. And he's saying that, and I can now know many years later when I would read a bunch about Curtis LeMay, and you have his love for the big chrome bombers. And then as he starts to realize just how unstoppable missiles are, they're kamikazes because there's no one on them, and you can't defend against them, and you can launch them from your own backyard with no refueling. He eventually warms up to them, and you see him. He still had his B-36s and the Peacemakers, but he also had this whole missile fleet. And in retrospect, I can see that the Secretary of the Air Force was saying this in this 2005 article about, he's like, we have to understand is the Air Force is air power, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be an aircraft. He's like, I love the aircraft as much as anyone else, but a sixth generation fighter might be some F-22 on steroids. A seventh generation fighter might be a drone swarm. And along the lines of like an eighth generation could be a button you press and every plane falls out of the sky. That to me is fascinating, is to remove back what you're saying about, oh, you're from Maine, you like the Red Sox, fuck the Red Sox. It comes back to that ego dropping thing, right? Where it's like, we want to believe, well, what's the next iteration of the 160th SOAR? What's the next iteration of the B2? What's the B-21? Or what's after the B-21? It might not be what we classically think of replacing these things. It could be air power. And that's a very loose definition. It doesn't have to be a Black Hawk. It doesn't have to be an F-35. Do you think that that's maybe something that's going on, is whatever the bleeding edge R&D is, you can blink twice if the Men in Black show up, but that it might not even be the idea of a traditional aircraft, but rather a very loose definition of air power, or, as the 160th would say, delivering the customer being Delta Force or DevGru?
So, it's, I don't think there's a right answer to it.
Yeah.
I think the Army's they've made a choice, right? They're going to go V-280 Valor. They're going to fly tilt rotor technology, which is relatively conventional technologies. They'll have as advanced survivability equipment they can put on that to counter their radar cross section and their both their radar cross section, their acoustics, and their heat signatures. They'll do whatever they can do for the foreseeable future. And that's a platform that'll fly for the next probably 35 years. So I think conventional helicopter, tilt rotor, jet aircraft they're not going anywhere. Manned aircraft aren't going to go anywhere for a while. But as you're talking about, as the Air Force call it, their next generation air dominance, or their
air dominance fighter.
Yeah. So what does that look like? And that goes back to your, when you're a kid and you're looking at Popular Mechanics, and there's a drawing of someone's thought and idea. That's right. I think the beauty of the Skunk Works folks are, cost is always a driver to everything we do. I don't know that technology exists right now that, so how unseeable does something have to be to make it relevant? Does it, when is good enough? I think that's what happens with technology, because there's such a lag. I'll use the V-280 as an example. That's been in production for years. It's 40 years of technology when you go back to when they've looked at pre-builds of what became the V-22, all the technology that's now in the V-22 that the Marine Corps flies, Navy flies, and some allies fly, to what that technology has done and been put into now the V-280. And the V-280's got to go into production. It's got to get full rate production. It's got to get ramped up, has to be flown. All the bugs have to be worked out of it. Engineers can't work out a bug. They can do modeling simulation for a long time, but you got to fly things. You got to put them in the desert. You got to have people like me, impact the ground a little bit harder than they were designed to impact the ground, to see how it's a very human endeavor, right? And these, either day, night, degraded visual environments, and how they respond to it. And what's the threat doing? So the threat's going to be a big driver. Do I need $1 billion helicopter when I don't, when I maybe don't need $1 billion of the technology? That's not saying we should ever trade off safety and survivability of the air crews and those they fly with ever. That's not the kind of trade-off I'm talking about. It's to talk about, what's the art of the possible now? Otherwise, Moore's law will never produce a computer. We'll never produce anything. We got to stop. We're just going to wait. We'll just keep developing.
Yeah.
And again, that was some of the ideas behind F-35, right? The ideas we've talked about, you skip a generation of technology. It's very common debate topics among senior defense officials to talk about, when they're pitching something, right?
Yeah.
Where it's a generation, we're gonna gap a generation of technologies, and we're gonna jump to this next seventh. we don't know that technology is yet, because you got to go to a sixth generation. You got to build it. You got to field it. You got to fight it. You got to fix it, and then you can make informed decisions of what generation 7 looks like or whatever it is. That's again, that's my opinion. I'm biased, of course. I flew an old school, bolted iron and jet engine attack helicopter. So, but it was a damn good one, and it lasted a long time, and it survived in some pretty trying times. So, you like to think those. That same mindset is pervasive. Now, not for everybody, because you want deep thinkers, you want out of the box thinkers. Obviously, clearly, as it relates to technology, to what becomes the realm of the possible. I don't need do I need a hypersonic helicopter? It wouldn't be impossible. But do I need a hypersonic attack helicopter platform to be over the shoulder of Marines? Probably not. And by the way, if Marines are engaged doing things, I want them to know that I'm there. Right? That's another part of it. That's a very important part of it. They're not alone. Yeah, I know there's drones up there somewhere, and there's maybe some hypersonic, vehicles flying around. I just like the sound. I sometimes just like the sound of hearing a jet come by or a helicopter come by, let me know I'm not alone. And that's important too.
Yeah. It doesn't. There's not the same kind of warm feeling of knowing that some NRO satellite's watching you from 30,000 miles. It's like, yeah, it's all well and good. Like, where's the cavalry, man? If I gotta call in some danger close shit, I don't want some nerd in Langley telling me like, we've got our eyes on you. Like, hey, I appreciate it, man, but that doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies.
We talk to Marines a lot, and it's the enemy understands it too. Sometimes that all it takes is a couple missiles into their position. They hear that sound, and
you
then
don't even need to hit them.
It's we say we'll stick. Marines would call us, hey, can you guys stick around, turn some gas into noise? We'd love to. We'll absolutely stick around, do that. Not love to. It's part of our mission.
Yeah.
And when you show back up again, whoever they're fighting, they hear that noise, they know bad things are coming their way. Bad things can come our way too. That's fine. That's the risk. That's the inherent risk. That's the job. But we don't believe that. We believe we're coming there to right a wrong of some sort. But yeah, that's where technology is going. Technology clearly is there. The hypersonics and the pieces we talked about. I think about today's. I'm biased. Today's Marine Corps, today's Army, today's Navy, and in that same force in 20 years from now, they're going to be different. There'll be certainly more understanding from kind of a global situation, not really global, but the situations will continue to grow and grow and grow. Assets will be able to help them that are not always right there. But eventually, every mission has a start and end date, and it's not usually something soft. It's usually something hard. And that requires, the tactics, it requires the equipment, it requires the training with those men and women to go do it. So it's not always going to be a laser beam putting out a communications node. It may be someone putting C4 on a communications node, or it's just the way it is.
Yeah, I interviewed my buddy Dell a lot. He was the youngest ever member of Delta Force, and he'll always kind of shoot me down because I'll be asking him about Black Ops shit and Skunk Works, and he'll be like, dude, it always comes down to just a guy with a gun.
Yeah.
He's like, you can have the most high speed thermal IR coming in stealth in a wingsuit. It's like, no, man, guy in an AK with sandals. Like, that's ultimately does it.
He's right. Yeah. Listen to him. Don't listen. Yeah. That's his job. He's a real professional. I'm an amateur when it comes to talking about, ground ops, clearly. Yeah.
No, but I mean, I think you're saying very much the similar things though. I think, you're saying like hypersonic this or no, I mean, really it does come down to just that, the bolted chopper with, a 20 millimeter cannon on it. Yeah, it's about all you need.
Yep. How'd it go? The insert was okay. Comm sucked. Things were different on the site than we thought. We had good fire support. We all got out, and thanks for the hard work and heroism of Rodriguez and Jablonski and Smitty. I mean, it's just the same. It's eternal. Yeah. And it goes back to their training. It goes back to their equipment. It goes back to their leadership. Technologies clearly play a role in supporting them. That's what's given them such an advantage for so long. Just situational awareness. But yeah, I would never. I would always listen to your buddy.
Yeah. Dale's the kind of Dale always brings me back down to earth. I was gonna say, and I'll let you go, and I gotta let you run. Would it be like the pinnacle of helicopter piloting, or would it almost be like put out to pasture to fly like Marine One with the president? I mean, that's got to be the apex, but it's also got to be kind of just feel like a chauffeur.
Um, I've had some good friends go there, some really good friends go there, and they loved it.
Really?
An incredibly good job. But it's for me, that's not my bag, right? That wasn't my thing, right? I'm an attack helicopter guy.
Yeah.
True, kind of that's been my focus. Not that I don't think it's an important mission. It certainly is. It's high vis, and it's really cool because you got to be able to fly multiple platforms. You got to get through this incredibly intense screening process. Oh, by the way, you got to be a damn good pilot.
Yeah.
The president doesn't want you crunching something on the White House lawn. But yeah, no, it's never something I really aspired to do. But friends of mine have done it. They've loved it, and it's been a gateway to a lot of things career wise. Because clearly, you've jumped a pretty tall fence to get in there.
Yeah, it's got to be the ultimate resume patter, right?
You could get a job flying if you've been
I
an
think
HMA.
you become a billionaire helicopter pilot after that. Yeah, I flew for POTUS. Yeah, there you go, buddy. $1 million, be Elon Musk's pilot. Yeah, that's probably it. That's probably it. It's like, yeah, man, it was a sick job. No, I'm just set for life now. They're never turning me down for anything. Yeah, I'll fly you around. Who are you? Bezos, whatever. Actually, Bezos got in a helicopter crash. But um, dude, I loved having you on. If you have to excuse my informal interview skills, I never know when to use proper language and when not to, and I doubt I'll ever learn because I've done 1,200 episodes this way, and I imagine I'll do 1,200 more. But guys, if you enjoyed this interview, and you should, please go into the description. Please go grab the book. It's a cheek puckering book, and if you're like me, it'll make you happy that you're on the ground. But Colonel, I'd love to have you on again, man, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Tommy. Appreciate it. Best to your listeners. Very cool.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for watching. Please go support the good Colonel. Go buy his book. It's in the description.